What's up, YouTube? I'm here doing my prediction video for UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez. Sorry I waited till the day before. It's just I wasn't sure if Figueiredo was going to make weight, and if he didn't, I wanted to make an accurate prediction video for the guys who were fighting for the belt. But he did make weight, so let's start the fight at the bottom. The first fight is Sergey Smykov versus Carlos Felipe. To me, Carlos Felipe looks like a decent up-and-comer. He's 8-0. He's primarily a striker. But I just think Sergey, I saw him fight Tai Tuivasa, who was another good, solid striker. I just think that his offensive wrestling is really good. His conditioning is also really good, and his submission game on top is really good. And like I said, Carlos he's primarily a striker. I think that if Sergey does what he did against Tai Tuivasa, he'll win by submission, probably in the first or second round. Next is Davi Halmos versus Armin Turskovsky. Armin looks like such a strong wrestler and a striker with his overall volume and pace. When he fought Islam Makhachev, that was just such a crazy back-and-forth wrestling match. And my thing is, I think his wrestling and overall pace and striking are just better than Davi everywhere. I mean, Davi's probably the better overall grappler if he can get it to the ground. He's like a world champion in jiu-jitsu multiple times. I just don't think he's going to be able to take him down and pin him down. Like, even if he does take Armin down, sorry, I got kind of like burp hiccups. I don't think he's going to be able to hold him down. I think Armin's just going to be able to keep getting back up and outpace him on the feet with his striking. I also think overall he's the better striker, so I'm leaning towards Armin to win by decision. Next is Malcolm Gordon versus Amir Abizia. To me, Amir just looks like he's overall better. I haven't seen a ton on either of these guys. They're both like striker grapplers. They're both solid flyweights, and I just lean towards Amir. I just think, he's got the better record. He has way more finishes. 11 of his 12 wins are by finishes, and he just looks like a much solid prospect. He's younger, too, so I'm leaning towards Amir to win by finish. Next is Brett Jones versus Montel Jackson, and to me, Montel looks like a very solid guy. He's got such amazing wrestling, and his striking seems to be getting better every fight. My biggest fear is that he is a little weak to the takedown, and overall grapplers that can kind of, survive his initial onslaught. I feel like in his last fight, he could have just knocked that guy out if he was a little more patient on the feet. But he kept taking it to the ground and giving that guy a chance with his jiu-jitsu. And I feel like overall on the ground, I do think Brett Jones is better. I think Brett Jones' overall grappling is better than Montel's just pure wrestling. And if this fight does hit the ground, which I do think it will, I think Brett Jones is eventually going to work his way to the back and either control Montel for the majority of the fight or win by submission. I think on the feet it's pretty close. Montel's probably got a slight advantage just because of his height and reach advantage. But like I said, I think this fight hits the ground, and I think overall on the ground, Brett Jones is better, and because of that, I think he's either going to win by decision or submission. Next is Joseph Duffy versus Joel Alvarez, and this fight's tough just because Joel, to me, he's really young, and I think he's getting better all the time. But I do think Joseph Duffy fights the exact same way and is better in both the areas, striking and grappling. My biggest fear is Joseph Duffy just hasn't been very active. There was like a year and a half in between when he lost to James Vick, and then he fought Mark Casey and lost. And since he lost to Mark Casey, it's been over a year, I think. So he's just so inactive, and it's like, I know he was young when he came into the UFC, but now he's getting close to 30, I think, or at least his late 20s. And I just think that he needs to start being more active. I know it might be an injury thing, but still, it's like, at this point, I don't know who's better because I haven't seen Joseph Duffy fight in so long. He could be so injured that he's not as good as he used to be. I can't go with that, though. I just have to go based on what I've seen. And what I've seen is I think Joel is a really good grappler who strikes for too long, and his striking isn't as good as his grappling, as where Joseph Duffy is good in both. And I think if this fight's just on the feet for 3 rounds, which I think it will be, because I think Joseph Duffy's a better overall wrestler, I think Joseph Duffy's just going to edge out all 3 rounds. I don't think he finishes Joel, but I think he just wins the striking exchanges for all 3 rounds and wins the 30-27 decision. Next is Grant Dawson versus Nad Narminian, and Grant Dawson's so lucky this fight was at catchweight before they even decided to fight. Like, he's so lucky this fight Allen shit is happening, because he has been having such a hard time making 45. He's obviously a 55er who just wants to fight at 45. And he just can't make that weight. Like, 150 is about as light as he can get. I think he missed weight his last 2 fights. And I think he is not going to win this fight. I think that he relies a lot on just his wrestling. I think his striking isn't that great. And I think Ned, we just saw in his last fight, he was fighting that, super good, world champion wrestler. Um, I think Ned has the overall better striking and the overall better grappling. I think his takedown defense is really good. And I think the only area Grant is better is when he's on top with the wrestling. And if Grant can get him down with the wrestling, then I think Nad's just going to outpace him and outbox him on the feet. And this is what I see happening. I think Nad, like I said, I think his takedown defense is good enough to keep it on the feet, and I think his boxing is good enough to outpoint Grant Dawson. So I'm leaning towards Nad to win by decision or even potentially knockout because Grant has been knocked out before. So I'm leaning towards Nad, like I said, to win by knockout or decision. Next is Cads, I can't say his last name, versus Roman, I can't say his last name either. Cads, even though he's 0-2 in the UFC, he's looked decent in both those fights. He's shown that he can take hits and give hits back. It's just a little bit of a conditioning thing. He swings a little bit too hard, and he throws a little bit too much early. I think if he can pace himself, he'd look a lot better. And with Roman, it's hard to tell because he's 6-0 outside the UFC. He's making his debut. He looks like a good striker with some decent grappling. This is really tough because I've never seen Roman fight, and Cads, like I said, even though he's 0-2 in the UFC, it looks like he just needs to pace himself better. I'm leaning towards Roman just because, like I said, I think that he's 6-0 and he looks like a really solid prospect, and I feel like they're trying to give him an easy first fight in the UFC. But you never know. Like I said, I've never seen him fight, and Cads, like I said, didn't look horrible in either of those fights. So I am picking Roman to win by knockout, but don't be surprised if Cads, works on his pacing and is able to win this one. On to the main card. The first fight is Alexandre Pantoja versus Askar Askarov. And to me, I think that this fight's pretty close overall. But at the same time, I think Pantoja has way more advantages overall. I think in terms of overall striking, I give it to Pantoja. I think Askar's a decent striker, but Pantoja's just a little bit better. And he definitely hits way harder. I also feel like in terms of overall grappling, I give the edge to Pantoja. The wrestling absolutely goes to Askar, but I think if Pantoja's on top of him, it's completely different than when Askar's on top of Pantoja. Like, when Askar's on top of Pantoja, it's probably going to be back and forth. If Pantoja's ever on top of him, it's going to be way more lopsided. And because of that, I just feel like, other than the wrestling, Pantoja's just got the better striking jiu-jitsu. So I think Pantoja's probably going to win by finish. I think he's going to win by either knockout or submission in like the second or third round. Next is Ariane Lipski versus Luna. I can't say her last name. A lot of people think this fight is close, but I personally don't think so. I think Ariane Lipski just looks like she's way better. Luana, she looks like she fights very similarly. And other than her, pinning Ariana to the ground, I just think Ariana is the overall better striker grappler. And because of that, I'm picking her to win. Not much to say about that fight. Next is Mark Casey versus Rafael Faiza. And this is a really weird fight because I feel like Mark Casey should be fighting guys closer to the top 15. Not in the top 15, but, right outside it. He's been looking really good recently. He's won like 2 or 3 in a row. And I feel like Rafael Faiza, he's 1-1 in the UFC. I think he was 5-0 outside the UFC, so he's like 6-1 overall. He's a good striker with all of his wins coming by knockout, but I just think that Mark Casey, we've seen his striking and wrestling have been getting so much better. It's like, I think it'll be close on the feet, but Casey's just going to time good takedowns and hold this guy down and wear him out. And because of that, I think Mark Casey's going to either wear him out and get a finish or just edge out all 3 rounds pretty clearly. I think this is going to be a pretty dominant win for Mark Casey. Next is Jack Hernansson versus Kelvin Gastelum, and to me, I think that this is a weird one because I feel like if Hernansson can get this to the ground, he has a real shot at submitting Kelvin in a lot of different positions. He's got really crazy chokes, and I definitely think on the ground he's way better than Kelvin. To me, the only thing is really on the feet. I think on the feet, it's overall close. I think they both have decent striking technique. It's just Kelvin hits way harder. That's the biggest difference. Is that Jack is a decent striker, but he doesn't have the one-punch knockout power that Kelvin does. But vice versa, I feel like Kelvin, even though he's got really good takedown defense and good at getting back up, I think he's always been small for this weight class, and Hernansson's pretty big, and if he can get it down, he's definitely the better grappler overall. So I think it's kind of a coin flip fight, just because Kelvin didn't look great against Till, and you never know. Like that Adesanya fight, like sometimes there's one big war and guys never get great after that. I don't believe that. I think Kelvin just had a bad fight against a really technical striker, and I think as long as he can keep it on the feet, which he usually can, I do think that his power is going to win out. I think when they're striking, Calvin's eventually going to land a big one because, like I said, he's got good technique too. And because of that, other than Jack Hernandez pulling this to the ground and catching him in like one of those crazy guillotines or something, I think the more likely scenario is that Kelvin keeps on the feet and eventually is able to clock Jack with a big shot and win by knockout. Probably, I think, late second for Kelvin. Finally, we got the main event, Deiveson Figueiredo versus Joseph Benavidez, and to me, the first fight was so close. It was so back and forth, and then, Deiveson caught him with a big shot, but my biggest thing is he missed weight by like 3 or 4 pounds, and it's like, we saw, I mean, with the Juicy A fight, I think he's literally just like, Darren Till, and people don't want to accept that. They just think he's this amazing guy, and it's like, yeah, he probably is, just like Darren Till, but just like when Darren Till fought Tyron Woodley, my mentality on that was if he makes weight, he was going to look like shit. And then he did. Tyron Woodley beat the shit out of him because he didn't look very good. He had a hard time moving around even. Like, it didn't look like he was himself. And then I said the same thing when he went to fight Masvidal. I was like, if he misses weight, he beat Masvidal. And if he missed it, he might win the round or two, and then he probably end up losing because he can't keep the pace. And that's exactly what happened, and I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I feel like when Figueiredo at this point misses weight, he's going to beat guys. And when he makes weight, he doesn't have the energy to keep him off of him, like how he normally does. And I think that's what we're going to see happen. I think he's just way too big, and when he has to make the right weight, we're going to see Benavidez hitting way more takedowns. And because of that, I think Benavidez is either going to win by decision or a late finish. I just see this fight being almost the same fight, just with Benavidez hitting more takedowns and Figueiredo gassing out a lot quicker because he made the weight, and I don't think he can keep the same pace. Yeah, like I said, Figueiredo can always catch him, but realistically, I think that it's just Benavidez fighting a little bit smarter, using a little bit more wrestling, and Figueiredo not being able to keep up with him. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.